All right, so exercise, example number 3 on page 271, we're going to talk about using the rate. How can we use the rate? Now, a lot of times when we're teaching this, we use a table. In a word problem, a lot of times you may not have a table. Sometimes you might. But let's look, it's basically just a comparison table, right? So the one that is given to us for example 3 is comparing ounces to cups. Okay, I'm going to put OZ and C. And it tells us that we need 8 ounces, let's say 8 ounces of chocolate chips for every 1 cup of butter, sugar, I don't know, right? So then it gives us some filled in spots and we have to finish the rest. Well, if this column right here is a comparison of 8 to 1, then that's a unit rate, right? So that tells me for every 1, I need 8. So if I have 2 on the bottom, that means I need what? 16. I said 1 times 2 makes 2, and 8 times 2 makes 16. So I can fill in the missing spots in my table. I'm going to put 16 here. If I have 7 in the denominator, that means I'm going to have 56 in the numerator, because 7 cups would need 56 ounces. And then if I've got 64 ounces, that must mean I've got 8 cups, right? Because 64 divided by 8 brings us back to 8, and 8 divided by 8 brings us back to 1. So let's look at how we could figure that out. We knew that we had 64, and we're comparing this to 8 over 1. So I can think, well, 64 divided by 8 to make 8. So what would divide by 8 and then make 1? That would be 8. Okay? So to fill in one row, we were multiplying. But to fill in the other row, we were dividing. Okay? So, all of these columns, 16 over 2, 56 over 7, and 64 over 8. When you reduce them to lowest terms, they all become 8 over 1. Okay? They all become 8 over 1. They reduce to the very same fraction. Now, example 4 tells us how we could solve a problem using a table. So let's look at example 4. Finley wants to make his favorite cookie for residents at the nursing home. And so he's given us a chart here with batches and the amount of time in hours that it takes, I guess, to make a batch of cookies, right? So let's make our chart here. And it tells us to state the ratio describing the time to make 3 batches and then find the unit rate. So we know that when Finley made 3 batches, it took him 2 hours. So he made 3 batches in 2 hours. We want to turn that into a unit rate. So 2, to turn it into 1, we're going to need to divide it by 2. To turn 3 into the appropriate quantity, we're going to need to divide it by 2, and we'll get 1.5. So he can make 1.5 batches every hour, right? Now, our chart tells us, gives us a 15 here and a 5 here. So let's think this through. If I know how many batches he has, and I want to figure out how many hours it's going to take him, I need to write my batches first. And then I'm going to divide to get to my unit rate. So 15 divided by what makes 1.5? Well, you could use your calculator if you wanted to and say 15 divided by 1.5 makes 10. So that means 15 divided by 10 makes 1.5. If I divide the numerator by 10, I'm also going to divide my denominator by 10. What number divided by 10 will produce 1? A 10 will. So in 10 hours, he can make 15 batches. Now, here we know how much time he has, but not how many batches he can make. And we need to turn this into 1.5 over 1, our unit rate. So how did 5 turn into 1? Well, we said 5 divided by 5. Actually, let's write this the opposite way. Let's write our unit rate first. And we're going to turn this into, here we go. So we'll write our unit rate first and turn it into this fraction here. So how did I turn 1 into 5? Well, I said 1 times 5. So if I multiply by 5 on the bottom, I need to multiply by 5 on the top. And if I say 1.5 times 5, I'm going to get 7.5. So he can do 7.5 batches of cookies in 5 hours. And we're able to kind of answer some questions back and forth about how much time to make this many batches, how many batches can you make if you've got this much time, and we can kind of go back and forth between the two by making a chart like this with our unit rate first and then fill in any information we knew. Now we knew this column. This is where we started. So we had to go backwards and find the unit rate before we could solve either of these columns here. So you would need to do that as well. Skill check C gives you a couple of practice problems. Complete the table of travel rates. Well, for the first table, miles and hours, they give you the unit rate, 55 miles to 1 hour, right? So then we can use that unit rate to find how many miles in 2 hours, how many miles in 3 hours, and then if they went 330 miles, how many hours did it take them, right? The second one, complete the table of pay rates, dollars an hour. It does not give us the unit rate, but look at the very end of that table. It does give us a rate of $60 for 8 hours. So let's take 60 over 8, reduce that down until we get a 1 on the bottom, and then we'll have our unit rate. 8 divided by 8 to make 1. So what will 60 divided by 8 make? It's probably not going to be an even number. It's going to be 7.5. So this table of pay rates is paying $7.50 every hour, $7.50 every hour. And then from that, now that you've got your unit rate with the 1 is in the denominator, you can complete the rest of the table. So let's look at what our assignment might look like for this lesson 7.1. And we are going to do we're actually going to do 1 through 25 all. And then we're going to do 27 through 33 odd. And then our cumulative review, which is problems 43 through 52.